Hey everyone, and welcome back to Cow Talks. I am Marcelo Wallau, Forage Extension Specialist with the University of Florida and an agricultural producer myself. On this podcast, we explore the many facets of agricultural production systems to discuss the technical aspects and decision-making processes that shape the competitiveness and long-term sustainability of our farms and ranches. Join me in these conversations where I explore the minds of different professionals to bring multiple perspectives to the challenges and opportunities facing modern agriculture.
Hey there, it's Olivia Mull. I'm the producer for Cow Talks. As part of the Forage Extension team, our number one goal is to make sure our listeners are learning from and applying the knowledge we bring on this podcast. We want to hear more about how you are using this information and get your feedback on current and future topics. That's why we have created a quick survey to hear from you and make this podcast even more relevant to your needs. The link is in the description. Please take 2 minutes to leave us your feedback. Thanks in advance and enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to Cow Talks. My name is Marcelo Wallau. I'm the Forage Extension Specialist and Associate Program Leader with the University of Florida. Today, my guest is Ernie Shea. He's the President of the Solutions from the Land, nonprofit organization that is dedicated to helping farmers and also connecting a lot of the researchers to finding solutions that come directly from the land to address conservation issues. Ernie has a long history of working with conservation, both at the national and the state level before becoming president of this organization. And Ernie is here today to talk to you a little bit about his work in conservation and with the organization, and also how he is bridging some of the gaps between producers, researchers, and other entities here in Florida through one of our new projects that I'm very excited to talk about it. Ernie, welcome.
Well, thank you, Marcelo. Great to be with you today.
I'm going to start with probably a very big question. Before you talk about the organization per se, you always talk about something that is very close to me because I'm a farmer myself. I live in a farm. I grew up on farming. And I'm a researcher too. I'm an extensionist. You use the word co-design. We're here to co-design solutions involving the farmers, and that captivates me. I would like to start with that concept and how that idea led to the development of the organization you have today.
Sure. Well, over the course of my career, I've worked in state government. I've worked in the not-for-profit arena. I've worked with government agencies. I've worked with the value chain, researchers, all types of folks that work with the farming community. And what I have always observed is there were always people that thought they had the answer to what would work on a farm or a ranch. And they were typically well-intentioned, but they would be coming to a producer with an expectation that they would take up and do whatever they thought was important. And what I've observed is that if somebody else is trying to come to you, trying to get you to adopt something, if you don't own it, if you're not embracing it, if you're not co-creating, co-designing, your heart and soul isn't in it. So we've found that a way to really scale up adoption and more sustainable, more resilient farming systems is if you put the farmer and the rancher, the forester at the center of discussions and decisions and position them not as a recipient of your idea, but a co-creator of a solution that will help them and provide public benefit.
That is fantastic. This is a very common idea in the European scenario. Farming systems design, in agricultural innovation and knowledge systems, and many other theories. Here in the United States, it's much more top-down driven, especially when you think about extension. How did you come to develop those ideas and implement them here?
I think it's life lessons over decades, observing what works and what doesn't. And I started my career back in the 1980s on the Chesapeake Bay cleanup effort, working for state government, when government decided that things needed to change on the farm, and it was a very government-centric, up-down driven agenda to change the way farming takes place. And the 20th century was typically about that. Governments decided what priorities were and then would put programming into place to try to affect change. And what we found is that over decades, there were more and more government programs, either from federal government, state government, local government, that were expecting producers to change the way they operate to deliver an outcome that they wanted. And it was characterized by silo management of objectives. So you have a food production goal with a set of agendas and priority programs. You concurrently have a water quality agenda that someone is pursuing, biodiversity agenda, a open space agenda, conservation agenda. And what I observed over the course of many years is that farmers were becoming more than frustrated, just getting to the point where they couldn't figure out what the priorities were, because they would wake up in the morning, go to the end of their lane, and there'd be 6 or 7 pickup trucks parked there. That's an analogy I used to use. Somebody's there to talk to me about water. Somebody's there to talk to me about wildlife. Someone there to talk to me about appropriate crop protection chemical use. Someone here to talk about whatever the program is. And then the farmers got to the point of saying, you got to talk to each other. There needs to be a way to integrate and bring together the various objectives, because I'm the one on the front line trying to manage the landscape.
That is very accurate. I've seen that here many times, and we are experiencing some of that currently. So
yeah.
you were in the state conservation. You went on to the federal scenario with the National Association of Conservation Districts for 10 years, and then you landed with the idea of the group, the Solutions from the Land. How did that work started? What prompted that?
It started out of a opportunity that presented itself when I was experiencing the limitations of a command and control, non-integrated approach to land management. The world was put on its head in 2001 with 9/11, and it forced a conversation about how are we delivering the outcomes that the world needs. And it was a heavy focus around energy. And there were a whole group of folks in Washington after 9/11 that started to worry about national security and ask questions around what is it that agriculture can do to contribute to a new energy future. And they pulled together a group of inside the Beltway folks and started a conversation about what they thought farmers could do. And I was invited to be in one of the chairs, and I heard the same tired old, we can fix their problem. And I raised my hand and I said, this is not the way to do this. And the conveners said, well, what would you do? And I said, well, I would pull together a group of farmers and ranchers and foresters that have experience, that are visionary leaders, that have experience on the land, and invite them into the conversation about what needs to change for them to deliver the outcomes that the world wants. And they said, wow, that sounds pretty different. Why don't you go do that? And the United Nations Foundation was the convener, and they said, we'd like to fund that exercise. So that led to the convening of a nucleus group of producers around the country who I knew through my affiliation and leadership in the National Association of Conservation Districts. And we brought them together and said, this is a unique opportunity. The inside the Beltway decision makers have hit the pause button, and they want you to have a conversation about agriculture, its future, and how agriculture can be enabled to deliver the outcomes the world wants. What do you need to do that? And that was the kickoff of what became Solutions from the Land. So we started with probably 15 producers, and then it began to grow. And as we took on different topics, we started with renewable energy contributions from agriculture. We then expanded into what can agriculture do to help address climate change challenges. And the work and the vision that these producer leaders had became the center of the discussion in the room. And ultimately, what it got down to was them saying, why are we always convening and meeting to talk about somebody's problem that they have with what we're doing? Why don't we go on the offensive and talk about how agriculture is the platform, the terrestrial land base, for delivering all types of important goods and services that the public wants? And why aren't we having that conversation? Why aren't we being thought about as a solution platform for hunger, for clean environments, for biodiversity, for healthy economies? And that's how we came together. So after about a 10-year run working on individual projects, the leaders became so convinced that this is a way forward, that we created a not-for-profit organization that we named Solutions from the Land. And its mission is to proactively advocate for enabling farmers and ranchers and foresters to deliver all types of goods and services that we call collectively ecosystem services. So food, feed, fiber, energy, clean water, biodiversity. When you're running a agricultural operation in a way that is first and foremost profitable, so you can be in business over time, you can produce more than just a commodity. You can deliver these quality of life outcomes, and that's the mission that we have. We grew to recognize that we are a science-based industry, and we better have science as part of our foundation. Began to integrate some scientists from our land grant partners around the country onto our board of directors. And now we say we're a farmer, rancher, forester, scientist-led NGO that's working to advance land-based solutions to global challenges.
I love that idea that we're not part of the problem. We can be part of the solution. We have to be part of the solution for this.
Yeah. We're changing the conversation because, sure, there's problems. But if you convene to solve a individual problem and don't have the conversation about everything else that's happening on a farm, then you're out of balance. You're not integrated. So we take our work at the state level, where we convene teams of farmers, ranchers, foresters, scientists, like we do in Florida with Florida Smart Agriculture, and now the Cheers Initiative. And we then share those lessons learned and experiences with other states across the country. We bring their experiences and recommendations into Washington to shape national policy. And we've now grown to the point where we're bringing our experiences onto the global stage by virtue of our membership in 4 United Nations platforms. So Solutions from the Land is an accredited member of FAO in Rome, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the Climate Convention based in Bonn. We're a affiliated entity within the United Nations Environmental Program in Nairobi, and we're also members of the Water Conference. So these are global platforms where the future of agriculture is being shaped. And we became very driven to participate in these because there are very few farmers that are ever in these rooms. So our board has said we need to show up and bring the voice of farmers and demonstrate the requirement to have co-creation and co-design, because there are unlimited expectations for what government or value chains or NGO groups want farmers to do. Well, let's put farmers right in the middle of that conversation. And that's what we do.
Fantastic. Yeah, I always actually was in South Florida this week talking to a rancher and a conservationist and talking the importance of that rangeland for the state in terms of conservation, because that's how we survive for hundreds of years in agriculture here, because we've been preserving this. Yes, as you said, there's things to fix. There is opportunity to improve, but contrary to what many people think, our mission is not to degrade the environment, but be sustainable, and sustainable starts with that economic concept. Ernie, before we change gears to the projects we're working directly here and how they're affecting local agriculture and countrywide, what of the perceived conflicts that exist is between production and conservation? There's many people that still think that you either do one or you do the other. How did you cross that barrier? Did you have a lot of pushback, like, well, this guy is only thinking about conservation, is wanting to get us out of business?
So it's not either or, it's both and. And if you are going to be sustainable, if you're going to be resilient, if you're going to be profitable as a producer today, you've got to be using the systems and practices that enable you to be that way. And conservation tools are important ways that we integrate with innovation and technology to ensure that the outcomes that we're seeking are actually secured. So you think of 21st century agriculture, it's not just about producing beef or strawberries or citrus or whatever it is that we're growing in Florida today. Sure, those are commodities that we're producing. But at the same time, for you to be economically viable, you've got to do more than that. You have to be demonstrating that you're resilient to the changing conditions that we're experiencing. And whether you call it extreme weather or climate change, that's just one example of a force that we're having to deal with on farms and ranches and woodlands in Florida. So the solutions that we work on are systems of systems, where you're working on productivity, but you're concurrently working on improving the resiliency of the operation. And conservation systems and practices enable both outcomes to be realized.
So you've been working all across the country. You actually recently brought one of your directors here to speak to us in Florida, which was a great example of the partnerships between the organization, the researchers, and farmers. Can you tell us a little bit more about the projects you're involved in? What's the outcome, the real impact that those projects are generating?
Sure. So I think of two examples that really bring this back to Florida. We've been doing this work, as I mentioned earlier, across the country. And I ran into Jack Payne, the former senior vice president at the University of Florida, at a national conference. And he heard about work we were doing in other states. And he was intrigued by that model of farmer-scientist co-creation. And he said, would you have an interest in bringing that model to Florida? And I said, yes, if there's a readiness and a willingness. Is the university, extension, and research ready to be a co-creator, rather ready to work with producers? Are producers ready to think broadly about all types of goods and services they can deliver? He said they most certainly are. And that led to a convening that we had about 5 years ago, where we brought a cross-section of well-networked agricultural leaders in the state together into a conversation with a group of FIFAS researchers and extension leaders about the current state of agriculture in Florida and the future that they want to achieve. And it was a very candid opening session where they laid on the table their fears and their hopes. And they described a agricultural production system as efficient and good as it is in the state of Florida as one that is struggling. And they started to identify the challenge that they were facing, the threats to survivability, things like broken markets, land fragmentation driven by 1,000 people a day moving into the state of Florida. They talked about environmental degradation challenges. They talked about labor challenges. They talked about climate change. And they said all of these are collectively impeding the ability of us to be sustainable over time, over generations. And we need to be thinking bigger than how do I produce better, more nutritious fruits and vegetables, as an example. Sure, we can do that. But if we don't have all of the other forces coming together to support that, it may not be an economically viable model. So the outgrowth of that conversation was we need to value Florida agriculture for more than just the commodities we produce. We need to be thinking about Florida agriculture as the sector that provides open space, that filters and stores water, that maintains wildlife corridors, that provides economic growth and opportunity in rural communities. And what they painted was a picture of agriculture as an engine of improved quality of life, and that those deliverables, we need to monetize them in the marketplace. So instead of being rewarded financially just for the pound of beef or the bushel of corn, peanuts, whatever it is that you're producing, we need to provide a monetary value for those other goods and services that go along with that. So if you're in a part of the state where agricultural landscapes are relied upon to filter and store water, how can you monetize that so that you're farming the ground, but you're also improving the water recharge of the watershed? That has a value. That doesn't happen without expense. If you're in an area where there is an important need to protect open space for wildlife corridors, and you're the owner of the land that are maintaining that landscape, if that's an important public priority, why aren't you being recognized for how you manage that land for the wildlife benefits that it provides? So that has led to the mission of Florida Smart Agriculture is to find ways to adopt this bigger delivery of goods and services, and they call them ecosystem service delivery outcomes, and monetize them in the marketplace so that producers are valued and compensated for all that they deliver. And that's the core mission of Florida Smart Agriculture. And we are implementing that in partnership with UF-IFAS, and our organization serves as the facilitating body, and IFAS provides the science and the education outreach. But the heart and soul of it are the farmer, rancher, forester leaders that make up the steering committee that guides the whole process. So every time we meet, we put them in the front of the room, at the center of the discussion. And it's not a survey that somebody fills out. It's not a one-off touch point. It's a integrated way to think about problems, to resolve them, to brainstorm solutions, to experiment with different approaches to getting a better outcome. And that's what Florida Smart Agriculture is all about. That led to then a opportunity to apply for a USDA NIFA grant that we accepted, working with Jose Dubois. Jose led a team that put together a application for a NIFA grant to work on conservation activities that really were about trying to bring winter cropping systems, to scale up the adoption of winter cropping systems in the state. As I understand it, and it's a 3-state project, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, 96% of the ground is winter fallowed. And that creates environmental challenges and missed economic opportunity challenges. So they put together a grant proposal under the name of the CHEERS project, and that stands for Conservation Hub for Economic Empowerment of Rural Stakeholders. And it's a 5-year effort to work with producers to scale up the adoption of winter cropping systems that will benefit producers first and provide a concurrent benefit to the public as a whole in the form of ecosystem service delivery. So we're doing this as a collaborative partnership with multiple land-grant colleges in the Southeast. But again, the unique defining aspect for us is that it's farmer-rancher led. And so our role is to facilitate that farmer engagement in CHEERS and ensure that the farmer-rancher experiences and recommendations are always front and center in the conversations.
So they are defining the needs.
Yes.
Those 2 projects are fantastic, and I consider myself a system thinker, but often I'm thinking on the system inside the farm, of the many components of that system. But the level of the projects you're working is actually a system at a much bigger scale, almost to the point that's macroeconomic to the state level here.
Systems of systems.
Systems of systems. That's a nice
Solutions.
concept.
And the way we're building it out in CHEERS is that we are recruiting farmers and ranchers in the 3 states to join in clusters or nodes that work together with on-farm, on-ranch experimentation of conservation systems, new cropping systems. It might be a different crop that has an opportunity for a local market. It might be an integrated crop livestock system that challenges the way land has been managed, where years ago, animals and crop production were co-joined, and we become, over time across the country, specialized and separated. But there are opportunities to bring cropping systems and livestock systems back together into a symbiotic relationship. We're recruiting farmers and ranchers that are saying, hey, I'd like to experiment with this. And our researchers are helping them design on-farm research projects that can assess pathways to improve profitability and improve the other outcomes that we're seeking. And it's a major collaborative among researchers, extension professionals, producers, value chain partners, and others. And we're building it from the ground up.
And one of the things that is fantastic about the CHEERS project is we're not only focusing on producers, but also targeting a very specific and extremely important demographic, which are the young farmers and ranchers. What is the role you see of the young generation playing in those projects and the future of sustainable agriculture?
They're absolutely critical and essential because they're going to be the ones that are carrying forward and ensuring production over the next generation. So it's very difficult to get young producers who are trying to make their living off the land to stop and pause and be part of something like this, because it's not what they normally do. It's an extra burden they have to carry. So we've designed this to show them that their investment of time will actually pay a dividend back to them in their operation. So the cluster, the nodes that we're forming, we're trying to have an intergenerational mix of what I call the wise old owls, the producers who may be in their 60s and 70s that are thinking about transitioning out, along with the newer up-and-coming younger producers, and put them into that co-creation crucible and have them think and explore and learn from each other. And for some, it might be a mentoring relationship. For others, it might be pure knowledge transfer. I tried this, it didn't work. But if you adapt and pivot and try something else, it can work. And with our research partners in the room who can assess progress, measure results, and identify other challenges that they may need to address as they experiment with these new systems, it's a really fascinating mixture of brainstorming with technical support that's leading, we are confident, to a better outcome for the producers.
Fantastic. Ernie, those projects don't stop at the farm gate. They are not only restricted to the agricultural practices, they are not only restricted to the university. Industry plays a major role. How do you see the industry getting more involved in those projects, and how we can get them more engaged in shaping this new agriculture, this new smart agriculture, this new cheers agriculture that we are looking for in those projects?
Well, that's another part of this co-creation, this 21st century way of working. You can't just drive it through a farmer-rancher co-creation lens. You've got to be cognizant of the fact that the value chain are integral players as well. So in Cheers, we've created a mechanism to bring in the market pull dimension of the value chain through purchasers of commodities that can help shape decisions that producers make. So an example might be trying to experiment with new types of grains that could be sold into the brewery industry, the distiller industry. They have to be confident, if they're looking for a local supply, that the quantity is going to be there, the quality is going to be there. So having them in the room to help contribute to the conversation of what standard needs to be met if we're going to experiment with a winter cropping system that could create a new revenue opportunity for a producer that would support a local industry that's going to build the local economy. So you do it together. And that's another unique dimension of Cheers, that we create a table that has many chairs around it, and we can have that interaction between the buyers and the sellers, the researchers, and get to a place where there's confidence that there's going to be a viable market that producers can sell into, and the market will be assured that the demand that they're pulling will be there, will be met.
Fantastic. How were you able to overcome some of those limitations in the past?
I think we're still working on that. That is a huge challenge. You just don't plant a crop with the hope and expectation that a market's going to be there. Or worse, you just don't invest in a long-term crop like a tree crop of 40 years or an animal agriculture crop where you're multiple years of producing an animal before they're slaughtered. You have to have confidence that there's going to be a real market there that will be there when you're ready. So it's a trust relationship ultimately that is formed between the participants, where there's confidence that the investment of time, money, and energy in producing a crop is going to result in a payout and more of a stable, secure market that's unique. And another example of this that we've heard lots of conversations about in Florida has to do with the livestock sector, where Florida is a huge producer of cattle. Cow-calf operations produce thousands of animals, but typically they're not finished in Florida. They're trucked into the Midwest or other parts of the country where they're finished, processed, and then meat is brought back. So part of our conversation has been about, why does it have to be that way? Why can't we rebuild an infrastructure so that the cattle can spend their entire lives in Florida. And to do that, what has to happen? There has to be economies of scale infrastructure that can process finished cattle, that can be delivered to markets. So it's a big conversation with lots of dimensions. And that's what's so unique about it, that people are thinking out of the box. It's not thinking about planting a crop for one season or 1 year. It's really about positioning the sector for its next 2 and 3 generation run. And the way the Florida leaders are thinking about it is in ecosystem service delivery. Those cows that they're raising are not just producing protein as a food feed source. They are also helping stimulate grass growth that is sequestering carbon. Well-managed rangelands capture and store water. There are places where biodiversity is abundant. And what they're thinking through is, how can we find a way to incorporate those values into the hamburger that's sold, the steak that's purchased, and have consumers comfortable that they're getting their value, not just for the protein, but for everything that comes with it that they describe as quality of life.
Fantastic. Ernie, I want to wrap it up with a call for action here. You work as an important bridge between main actors. And if we could trace the main actors, I would put government in one side here, or the agencies, the multiple agencies that are related to government. We have producers, we have industry, and we have academia. What would be a message for each one of those groups in this integrated system?
Our central message is change your paradigm. Think differently. Don't think about the farm, the ranch as the problem. Think about it as the solution. And invite producers to come into your conversations and listen to what they are saying. Learn from them. And a second message, I think, is to honor and respect that we need to be addressing multiple challenges and opportunities concurrently. So just don't convene us to talk about one issue. Think of these living landscapes as delivering multiple goods and services, and treat them with the value and respect that they earn. So those would be my thoughts.
Fantastic. This very deep thinking here. And I would like to also leave here a call for the producers that are listening to us, because the Cheers Project has multiple opportunities for engaging through the modules, through producer schools, and even through youth programs that we're offering to engage with students enrolled in FFA, Future Farmers of America. Ernie, thanks a lot for the interview today. This is fantastic. I am part of the Cheers Project, but just hearing more you talk and the experience you bring to this whole project, and with this new mindset, as you said, and approaching those challenges and opportunities from a big picture perspective, as you said, system of systems.
It's really fun to be part of this project, because Cheers is a way to demonstrate that this new model, this 21st century model of co-creation and integrated problem solving works. Yep. So we're thrilled to be part of it and look forward to continuing to share the Cheers team's experiences across the country and across the world.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. For those that are interested in episodes in integrated crop livestock system, my colleague Dr. José Dubé has participated in this podcast before, so take a look in our archives and you see more information on the use of cover crops and grazing in the winter through integrated crop livestock systems. Ernie, looking forward to have you more on this podcast, and hope we can continue this work for a long time.
We will, I'm sure. Thank you so much, Marcelo.
Thank you. This podcast was brought to you by the University of Florida Forage Team with technical support from the UF CAUS Faculty Instructional Resource and Support Team. This episode was produced by Marcelo Wallau, Olivia Mowley, and Ashley Kalabrowski. I hope you have enjoyed this conversation. And if you have any feedback, please leave us a comment in our social media or send us an email to forages@ifas.ufl.edu. Until the next one,